Welcome. I'm Andrea Hable, President of the League of Women Voters of the Woodbury-Cottage Grove area. The purpose of the League, national, state, and local, is to empower voters and defend democracy. For more than 100 years, the League of Women Voters has been a trusted source of nonpartisan voter registration and education, and a long-standing witness to Minnesota's proud tradition of voter access and election integrity. The League envisions a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. The League strengthens our communities by conducting candidate forums, promoting voter registration, and informing voters about public policy through educational programs. We invite you to visit our website, lwvmn.org, to learn about the statutes, best practices, and safeguards associated with Minnesota elections. Follow the link to Vote 411 for a one-stop shop for all your election needs personalized to you, including a voter's guide. We hope all of our candidates here tonight have submitted their information to the voter's guide. And now I'll turn it over to Jodi Ritacca, who is moderating tonight.
Thank you, Andrea. And hello and welcome to this candidate forum. I'm Jodi Ritacca, and I'm a volunteer with the Woodbury-Cottage Grove Area League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters Minnesota and our local leagues conduct candidate forums to provide the public with an opportunity to hear candidates discuss the issues that are important to members of the public. The League is a nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. The views expressed in each forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters. LWV Minnesota and our local leagues post complete, unedited recordings of forums. Editing is authorized only for official media reporting. Excerpts or editing clips of the candidate forums may not be used for partisan or political purposes. I'm very pleased that candidates with us tonight are the Minnesota House District 53B, Aaron Brooksby, and Rick Hansen. So thank you for being with us today. Each candidate will be asked to provide 1-minute opening statement, and we will go in alphabetic order with the opening statements, which means candidate Aaron Brooksby will go first. Brooksby. And the reverse order will be used for closing statements, allowing candidate Rick Hansen to go first with each question, and the order of response will be reversed. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer questions and 30 seconds for any rebuttal. Our timekeepers tonight are League of Women Voter Volunteers Vivian Latimer Tannehill and Diane Fredrickson, and they will hold up signs that indicate 30 seconds remaining, or then 15 seconds remaining, and then finally stop, and you can finish your sentence, when you hit that sign of stop. The questions have been submitted by voters to the League or during voter service events in the community. The viewing audience can submit questions by calling or texting the number displayed on the screen during this forum. We will not have time to answer all the questions submitted, and the League volunteers will decide which questions will be presented in order to address a variety of topics. And at the finish, the candidates will each have 1 minute for closing statement. And the forum is being live streamed and broadcasted by South Washington County Telecommunications Commission. And the forum is being recorded and will be viewed until Election Day on the SWCTC website and the Woodbury-Cottage Grove Area League of Women Voters website. So let's begin. And we'll begin with Aaron for opening statements.
Thank you. My name is Aaron Brooksby. I think Rick's probably going to say where the district is, but essentially our district straddles the Mississippi River. So I live over in Inver Grove Heights. It covers South St. Paul, Newport, St. Paul Park, that side of Cottage Grove, this side of the highway, and then down into Great Cloud Island. I am a Washington State native. I moved to Minnesota in 2016 with my wife. She's a native of Woodbury. And one of my first jobs after being out here, I drove school bus for 833. And so a lot of the neighborhoods here in this area in Newport and St. Paul Park are close to my heart, and lots of the little kids were a joy to work with. Now I'm an attorney. I am a real estate attorney, and I believe in lowering taxes, supporting small businesses, and protecting our individual rights. I'm a strong community builder. Thank you.
Rick, for your opening statements.
Hi, my name is Rick Hansen. I currently serve as your state representative. I want to make sure I thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum. It's really critical at this time to have fair and independent sponsoring of events like this and doing the work you do. So thank you for that work. Why vote for Rick Hansen? Well, I have served in the legislature for several years, and I've developed the knowledge, skills, and abilities to get the job done. I mean, there are many projects and programs and laws that affect our district that I have authored and passed. Some of those on the Washington County side, odor control legislation that we've passed, inflow infiltration for Newport, roads for St. Paul Park, trees for throughout the district. Those are just a few of the things, but there's more work to be done. I'm asking for your vote for another term in the Minnesota House to continue the work and accomplish things on behalf of the district. Thanks.
Thank you, Rick. Now we begin with our questions. Our first question, if elected, you will be representing your community in the House of Representatives. How will you balance the needs of your constituents with those outside of your district and the local concerns that you will keep in mind? So we'll begin with Aaron for the first question.
Thank you. So like I said, I'm an attorney by profession currently, and that means that I'm a strong advocate. As an attorney, I have a duty to advocate vigorously and ferociously in some cases for my clients. And so if I were elected, I would have a similar attitude towards advocating for our district. I am also recognize I feel like I'm a fairly logical person, and I recognize that there are certain situations where the needs of the many are more important than the needs of the few. And so in order to make things happen and to ensure that we can create the laws that we need, I'm not afraid to, I guess, negotiate. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick, same question.
Well, part of the challenge is just weighing within the district as well. We have I think one of the things that's cool about our district is some very distinct communities. And so weighing the challenges between those in terms of priority is important. And you take that to the larger level with the state. And the way you do that is you've got to be fair, and you've got to be honest, and you have to have people trust you. And I chair the Legislative Audit Commission. I chair the LCCMR. And although those are legislative things, I think I'm selected by my peers in order because they trust me, because I'm able to be that fair arbitrator within the parties, within the region, and even within our own party. So I ask for your support because that's how I approach things, to be a neutral person in terms of balancing those issues, but moving everybody forward so that some people can win and achieve what they want.
Next question on budget and finance. The economy is front and center in many people's minds. What strategies would you recommend to address the impact of inflation on Minnesotans? In the next biennium, what do you believe should be Minnesota's spending priorities? And what should the state do with surplus? And how should the state resolve a budget deficit? So, Rick?
That's a lot for a minute. So I'll take, I like building things. I think that they help with infrastructure, helps build long-term, whether it's for small businesses and providing assets, public assets that help private individuals and private businesses thrive. So where I like putting the money is there. If there are things that need to be cut, I've gone through budget cutting before. We look at maybe temporary funding increases that had gone out and money that hasn't been spent trying to recover that. I think we have a lot of dedicated funds that were set up for individual purposes. We want to protect those and make sure they continue to be used for those purposes. And then if there is a short-term or a long-term surplus, I think we want to look at early childhood education for making sure we help the littlest amongst us.
Aaron?
That was a long question. I'm going to kind of tackle the priorities, and then if I have time, I'll talk about a deficit. I think one of our biggest priorities is probably always going to be education. I mean, our next generation, our youth that are growing up, if we can ensure that they can be successful, all of the issues that we're facing, whether it's in the economy or whatever other issue, hopefully that can be as short-lived as possible. And so by investing in our youth and in our schools, we can then, I guess, have the faith and the hope that those youth can then take that and run with it and be successful. And so that's my biggest priority in terms of budget and taxes, is I want to make sure our schools are funded. One of your other, kind of on the tail end of the really long question, was how do we deal with the deficit? I don't have a lot of time, but planning and transparency is critical.
Thank you. And as you mentioned, education is our next question. What should be the legislature's role, if any, in determining school curriculum, or what is taught in classrooms throughout the state? And that goes to Aaron.
Great. Thank you. I kind of made my way into I'm going to talk fast, sorry. I made my way into the political scene. I ran for school board in Inver Grove Heights last year and kind of dove deep into what's going on in my district. And I drove school bus in 833 in this district. I think we need to prioritize. Was that the question? Was it the priority of how we should fund it?
Yes. What should be the legislature's role, if any, in determining the school curriculum and what is taught in the classroom throughout the state?
Thank you. From my perspective, and especially in Inver Grove Heights, I think local districts need to have more of a say in the curriculum. Different districts and have different demographics and different needs. And so the state coming in and saying, these are your options, this is what you have to do, especially when they don't fund some of those things, it can be really a bad situation for those districts, who then have to beg and plead for more money from the people in their districts. And that's.
Rick,
Thank
same
you.
question.
I don't think we want 201 legislators writing curriculum. I think that, when curriculum and standards have been written, you provide the authority for the Department of Education or working with the school districts and locally elected school districts to be working on that. But I think there's a role for state government on funding, and particularly for low tax capacity communities where it's harder to get, you just don't have the tax capacity to pay for it. And so communities like South St. Paul, older communities that just aren't able to provide the funding the state needs to.
And a second part to that question now. What would you do to ensure the funding of our public schools adequately keeps up with inflation and the population growth? Rick?
We provided a great deal of funding this year, but really what that did was replace the money that had been coming in from the federal government during COVID. And so you have to have sustainable long-term funding. And that's where the earlier question I had is that if we have long-term surpluses coming in, you need to provide that in the long run so that your school boards have the ability to budget. We've historically done per pupil. I think we need to provide additional dollars for mental health and for counseling. Those are things that help out everyone, and those are some places where I'd put state dollars in. But again, there are communities where focusing in, for example, here when the proposal was to close Newport Elementary, that helped fail that referendum, and the community rose up and said we need something different, and the district responded. And I think when the district responds and wanting to keep things, we need to be rewarding that from the state.
And Aaron, the same question. What would you do to ensure the funding of our public schools adequately keeps up with inflation and our population growth?
So I agree with a lot of the things that Rick said with that, so I'm going to kind of take this a little different direction. I think we need to provide alternatives for our students. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation. For myself, I struggled for different reasons when I was in public school, and my children have some neurodivergent shenanigans, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. And so I think at the state level, we can make it not just oh, you can afford private school, or you have to go to public school, or be homeschooled. I think there's more than just kind of that black and white situation. And at the state level, we can make that change so that the dollars follow the children instead of being tied to a district or a city or something like that. We want to tie it to the children so that they can receive the benefits of that money.
Thank you. Rebuttal?
I don't support vouchers. I believe in the public school system. I think anything that pulls money away from the public school district, hurts the overall community. So I just don't support vouchers. I think it's important that we fund our public schools and make sure we have the programs in there to help those kids in need.
Next question is on health care. Given the U.S. Supreme Court adopts a decision overturning Roe versus Wade, state legislatures are enacting new laws regarding the women's reproductive health issues, including access to care and birth control. What measures, if any, do you think the Minnesota legislature should enact regarding women's reproductive health and abortion? Rick?
We passed a number of provisions in the last 2 years. I want to make sure we protect reproductive freedom. I think when we look at other states, we see the risks that are occurring where states are moving backward in protecting reproductive freedom and even looking at in vitro fertilization and contraception. I think that Minnesota will become a beacon for folks from around the country who appreciate those protections of private rights and are going to have that support leads to a better state. So I strongly support the reproductive freedom, and I think it's an issue not just for women, but for the entire state.
Aaron, same question. What measures, if any, do you think the Minnesota legislature should enact regarding women's reproductive health and abortion?
Thanks, Jodi. This is one of the areas that Rick and I differ on pretty extremely. I'm the father of 3 daughters, and I had a 4th daughter that died at 18 weeks in gestation, and we had a birth for that baby, or that fetus, as some people would like to say. I strongly believe that biology also, I have my beliefs, and I consider myself a scientist, and that once there is a unique individual in that mother, we have to consider both lives. I'm a strong proponent of reducing some of the laws that went in place this most recent session that allow abortion up until birth for little or no cause. And so that would be a major priority. Whether or not we can make that happen, I would love to see a change back to protecting our littlest people.
Staying on health care, what can the legislature do to improve and enhance resources for mental health care? And we'll go to Aaron.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of mental health care, the whole healthcare issue is so large that I don't think anybody has a specific answer. As we're talking about mental health care, from my perspective, I see the big need for mental health care stems from the lack of community. Whether that's in the youth, being with the COVID shutdowns and not having that connection, or whether it just be our society moving towards a more isolated society. My attitude is more preventative, than addressing the symptoms. And so I think we need to do more for our communities so that our communities can have the support they need to build themselves up and create that space so that people feel part of that community and hopefully have less of that mental health issue because they are part of a community.
Thank you. Rick, what can the legislature do to improve and enhance resources for mental health care?
You know, I'm not sure what the cost would be on this, but you think of, we all have an annual physical, right? We all go take a physical. And to have that same type of check-in annually, I think would be helpful because things change in your life. You go through various crises and trauma and changes as life goes on. And, you know, if we had some type of way of people being able to check in with a professional, just like we do with a doctor, a physical doctor, I think that'd be something. That's a big task. You know, specifically, I've mentioned earlier, counselors in schools. I think that has a big deal. I think counselors in higher education, when folks are going into either trade school, I mean, it's launching is harder than it used to be. And I think having that assistance and somebody available is really important. And then also in careers, having that mental health counseling available, particularly for our first responders.
Can I don't
Aaron?
know if this is necessarily
Rebuttal?
a rebuttal, but one of the issues that my family has faced is the lack of healthcare providers. And so if we can incentivize healthcare providers to come to the state or some other form of that, having access to it, I think would be a big change and a help for all.
And I think part of that is if we provide, you know, for the training for healthcare providers or for counselors and that student debt, dealing with student debt, if we can find some way of you know, reducing that or reducing that impact or working that off, you know, so that that burden isn't there for 20 or 30 years for folks and that they can focus on providing care rather than worrying about the debt that they're carrying.
All right, next question is on public safety. Many are concerned with gun violence in our communities. What legislation, if any, would you support to meet the need for safe communities? Rick?
We passed a number of provisions, and some have been struck down by the courts. So, having the challenge of drafting legislation that survives current court scrutiny is important. I think the safety and securing of firearms is really important. I'm a hunter, trying to make sure that things are locked up, so kids don't have access to them, but also people in a moment of crisis don't have easy access to firearms where they could use them in a moment of rage or anger or confusion. I think those are really important things that we need to do. Gun violence, that's kind of within the home or within the residence, but we also, we're not going to be able to armor our schools out of this. So again, the mental health counseling is there, but also looking at certain, you know, now we see people being able to make weapons and, you know, put things together. There just has to be a way in terms of preventing gun violence.
Aaron, what legislation, if any, would you support to meet the need of safe communities?
Thank you. Like Rick was saying, we're living in a world where the technology and the information is available to a basic consumer to be able to build a gun in your living room. Because of that, I think we're past the point where the government can effectively prohibit somebody who's trying to get a gun from getting that gun. I think talking a lot about gun violence, we need to refocus on the violence aspect of it, that guns are a tool used to commit that violence. There are a lot of other tools that are options. And so in terms of what the legislature can do, I'm a strong Second Amendment proponent. So instead of restricting or dealing with the tool, I think we need to build communities again. We need to make it so that those people are supported, both in their mental health, in their economy, in their families, and in their communities. If we focus on community engagement, economic empowerment, and education, hopefully our children will not have to turn to violence.
Go ahead.
We don't want to be an open carry state. I mean, you see some of these states where people are carrying rifles around to the coffee shop. I mean, that's just mind-boggling to me that and the gun industry pushes and pushes and pushes to have more access, open access on their firearms, and so I don't need to carry my shotgun around when I'm going pheasant hunting. I need to use it for pheasant hunting. I don't need to carry it into the coffee shop.
Staying on public safety, what measures would you put in place as the state rolls out the legalization of marijuana? And Aaron?
Yeah. So in my profession, I'm a real estate attorney, and I work a lot with homeowners associations. The recent changes to marijuana usage affect multifamily housing in different ways than in other situations. And so I have had a lot of questions from both clients and homeowners trying to figure out and navigate these new laws. That it's legal, but for many of these homeowners, it's now illegal in their homes, in the place that you would expect most to be able to use it. In terms of the public safety questions about it, I go back to community building. I think we need to have a better relationship with our police officers and first responders. As we build our communities, we have that strength that's inherent. We can rely on a great deal of wisdom from all members and those older members of our communities. Thank you.
Rick, same question. What measures would you put in place as the state rolls out the legalization of marijuana?
I think one role is to have oversight in the multiple committees that the bill went through to see how implementation is working. Just on the workplace, heavy equipment operators, I've had folks in the district who've contacted me about, how does this apply, or how should it apply for operating dangerous equipment with a legal substance. So I think that's one question. I'm concerned, as I mentioned before we legalized it, that we get into a situation of monopolization, that all the pop-up small business, mom and pop, what's happened in many states is they last for 18 months to a year and then get gobbled up, and then all of a sudden we have 2 or 3 companies. I don't want Philip Morris making the cannabis cigarettes. And I think the grow your own is one of the ways to prevent that, but also encouraging these small businesses. We need to watch and make sure everything doesn't become corporatized.
Moving on to our next question on environment. What do you plan to do to support safe air, water, and soil for our communities? Rick?
Well, as the chair of the Environment Committee, we just authorized an air quality monitor to be placed near Newport Elementary. I wrote that into the law. We need more of that, I think, around our schools. Looking at air quality is critical. We could be sitting here in this city hall on a hot day and be able to smell the rendering plant across the river. We need to make sure implementation is occurring there when there are consequences to bad behavior for the smell and the odor, which may be a precursor to air quality issues. Air quality affects water quality. We have a legacy of PFAS contamination in our district. We're going to have to continue to look at those. That's going to involve more monitoring, but also the more monitoring we do, there also has to be consequence when there is contamination.
Aaron, same question. What do you plan to do to support safe air, water, and soil for our communities?
My take on these issues, like Rick said, healthy water contributes substantially to healthy air. I also am a firm believer that healthy soil contributes to all of the above. And so my biggest concern out of all of those items is our soils. We're very lucky to live in one of the best places to farm and grow things in the country and even in the world. And I think we need to do more to ensure that we're protecting that valuable, extremely valuable resource, whether it's so that I can continue to farm in my backyard or farm I'm not farming, but I'm growing tomatoes, or whether or not that is that very large industrial corn or soybean farm. I think all of us need to ensure that our soils are healthy, because that will contribute to the health of everything. Thank you.
Rick?
One of the programs we created was Lawns to Legumes to help out pollinators, and I think the next step is essentially Lawns to Lunch, where you help folks, provided the technical assistance to convert their lawn into gardens. I mean, that used to be the way back in World War II, is people had their victory gardens. And I'll go back to the corporate consolidation and monopolization. You know, there is freedom in growing your own food. There is freedom in you own that property. And even if it's the HOA too, there's freedom in the residents providing for food.
Staying on the environment, there have been multiple instances in the media where the State Departments have not followed rules and processes based on legislation. What can the legislature do to encourage them to comply? Examples include the permitting process for the Endbridge's Line 3 and the DNRs violation of federal wildlife management rules, resulting in the withholding of a $22 million federal grant. Aaron?
Yeah, thank you. I might not be terribly surprising. I'm a lawyer. We need to be following the laws. If you have issues with the laws, talk to the people at the Capitol to make the laws, adjust the laws if that's the issue. But in terms of the separation of powers, we need to be able to rely on our executive branch, whether in whatever capacity that is, to be enforcing the laws that we have. One of my first jobs out of law school, I was a clerk for a judge, and I heard her say it repeatedly that it wasn't her job to change the stupid laws, but she had to enforce them. That's very much my attitude too, that if we have issues with the enforcement, we need to look at the law, not necessarily stop enforcing it.
Rick, what can the legislature do to encourage them to comply?
Transparency is the best disinfectant. That's the Justice Brandeis statement from almost 100 years ago. And I think that's important. For example, on the wildlife management area and the logging there, putting on my hat in the Legislative Audit Commission, we asked for that the legislative auditor review that. And so not just having the committees review things, but having the legislative auditor look at things. We did that with the water gremlin. You get a whole report that if you have that respect and trust in the legislative auditor, when that report comes out, generally and you have the public commission hearing, a bipartisan commission hearing, it usually forces action. Shouldn't have to be that way. I think nationally, we're going to see more because of the Chevron decision being overturned, which gave deference to agencies in terms of their expertise.
Next question has to do with housing. The housing crisis is being impacted by corporations buying houses and putting them up for rent. This practice reduces the number of houses available for individuals to buy. What are your thoughts on a solution to this problem? Rick?
You know, traditionally in our metro area and other states, it's almost housing occurs like coffee being spilt on a table. It spreads out and you have development, and then there's push to push the services out to those new houses. I think we have to look at building up. We need to have more multifamily residential options that are affordable, and that's going to take some changes in zoning. The question at the legislature is that done at the state level or is that done in the local communities? I think we need to incent those infill and development for our communities to grow up rather than out. Getting back to the soils question, you keep building houses farther and farther out. The demand goes for more services. When we have the services and the abilities in many of these areas, we just need to build up.
Aaron, what are your thoughts on the solution to this problem?
I have thought about this problem a lot. I'm a thankfully a first-time housing buyer in the last couple of years, and it was at the point with inflation and interest rates and everything where I didn't know if that was going to be an option. I don't want that for our youth and our upcoming generation, and many of those currently that would expect to be able to live the American dream right now that can't because of everything. I don't have good solutions for this because it's so complicated. I'm not a fan of these, well, let's say this, I am a true capitalist where supply and demand help our economy grow and stay stable. When we have these essentially economic oligarchs, these giant corporations that run the country or that run the economy, and that in this case take over all the houses, we have to balance these situations where we want our businesses to be able to thrive and succeed, but we want to make sure that individuals can live the American dream.
Next question has to do with equity. With what legislation, if any, would you support to address racial and ethnic disparities in Minnesota? And we'll start with Aaron.
Sure. Racial and ethnic disparities are already protected federally. There's a lot that our Minnesota Constitution mirrors of our federal Constitution. I think a lot has been brought out in the open specifically in the last 4 years, about some inequalities and the feelings behind all of it. My attitude towards all of this is transparency is a key. We need to be able to, again, grow our community. We need to be able to get on the same page. We need people to trust both the government, to trust first responders, and if we can, it's going to be a messy process, but I think we need to do what is necessary so that we can trust. And I think the biggest part of that is through transparency, so that we can know what is happening and why it's happening, and not have to guess.
Rick, what legislation, if any, would you support to address racial and ethnic disparities in Minnesota?
We need to recognize that discrimination occurs, has occurred, is occurring, and probably will occur in our lifetime, continue to be a challenge that vexes our country and our communities. And it may be not overt. We were just talking about pollution, but the consequences of pollution for communities of color, often they bear the brunt of that. A friend of mine at the legislature said, when we're dealing with equity, we need to think about it as a cake that we all have to be building. And you build it into the batter, and it's not the frosting on the cake. It's not what you point to and say, look what we did. We just have to incorporate it into everything. And that's what we've tried to do. On the environment side, today the Pollution Control Agency put out their environmental justice mapping that we had asked them to do, and we wrote into statute for environmental justice. We need to look at economics, all of that, and put it into the programs to make a deliberate outreach.
Along those same lines, what policies would you support to reduce the number of hate crimes? Rick?
I think we need to talk about it and to recognize it and speak out against it. I'll use an example on the other side of the river where there's a mural with Malcolm X on it, and it has been vandalized maybe 5 or 6 times. One of those was on the Martin Luther King holiday. And people had taken paint and put them into Christmas ornaments in January and drove by and threw them at that mural that was celebrating African American heritage. We need to call that out when that occurs. Still never been caught. Those folks haven't been caught. Somebody knows. Didn't just magically happen. So that's just one example of hate crimes. We need to speak out when they occur, and as legislators, be a leader in doing that.
Aaron, same question. What policies would you support to reduce the number of hate crimes?
My initial thought with this goes back to education. I think we can do a lot in terms of community building as we educate everyone. We get into situations where we're fighting, oftentimes infighting, with the same members of our community based on racial or ethnic issues because of a lack of understanding. I firmly believe that we need to understand as much as possible, right? One of the ways that we can reduce hate crimes is to allow others to be educated so that they can recognize that we're all people, we all have our issues, and there's good in all.
Next question, we move on to multi-issue bills. At the very end of the session, multiple topics seem to be rolled into one huge omnibus bills with no time to be appropriately evaluated by the voting public or even many legislators. What are your thoughts on this practice? Aaron?
I think the habit that our legislature has had in recent years and that many legislatures have regarding omnibus bills, you just get a bunch of stuff that we all kind of agree on and we throw it all together and you pass it. I am firmly and strongly against that. That's not what our legislature was set up to do. It's not how we as taxpayers should be supporting our legislators or legislators. They need to be doing a better job of representing the people. I'm a strong advocate that the omnibus system is not the right way that we should be making laws in Minnesota. Effectively, it just creates a situation where whatever party is in power, whether that's in the House or in the Senate, they just get to decide all of the laws that year. We need more balance in the legislature, and I think we can create more balance by reducing this ability to just throw everything together and sign it.
Rick, same question. What are your thoughts on this practice?
The end of the session this year was a mess, it's been a mess several times. One thing I did is with the lottery proceeds dollars, the LCCMR, we passed that about 5 weeks before the end of session. And that was the earliest it was done, and it wasn't included in the environment omnibus bill. So it took deliberate effort to get it through the House and the Senate, get it to the floor and get it to the governor. And that wasn't easy because the pattern is always to the omnibus. Why should we do this? Maybe it could be held up for leverage, but we got it done because it took deliberate work. The environment omnibus bill, which was the agency's DNR, PCA, Board of Water and Soil Resources, Zoo, that passed. It wasn't included in that large bill at the end because we were able to work it out ahead of time and passed it before the end. So I have the experience to get the job done. I am not the speaker, I'm not the majority leader, but I can do what I can to get things done early.
Another question on childcare. A barrier to workforce participation is the availability and affordability of childcare. What, if anything, is the legislature's role in addressing this situation? Rick?
Childcare is out of reach for many people, and it was expensive when our son was little. It's even more so now. And the access to childcare, whether it's even available, it's an impact on our economy because if people don't have the childcare, they can't go to work, struggling with childcare. So we need to provide some support on that in terms of keeping existing childcare options open and look at how do we make it easier for folks, particularly in employment, to have that childcare because if you don't have the childcare, you lose that job.
Aaron, same question. What, if anything, is this legislature's role in addressing this situation?
So the legislature, one of the big jobs beyond creating the laws is to fund things, right? And so the real question here is how is the state going to help pay for this? I agree with Rick. Thankfully I'm in a situation where I have a bunch of kids, but my wife stays home. That's a choice that we've made. I don't think that's the right answer for everybody, and that's a question and an answer that is individually family-based. But as the state, what we can do is support those families in whatever option they're choosing. Similar to a lot of the other questions that we've had tonight, if we invest more in local community programs, if we promote more inclusive community centers and build that local community, it might not be a situation where we have to pay somebody for healthcare. If we can find a neighbor who it turns into a grandparent that provides those services for us, we're in a better situation.
We're getting to our final question here. As a member of the legislature, what measures, if any, would you support to reinforce or ensure voter confidence in our elections? Aaron?
Especially recently, but I think it's been ongoing for years. There's a large percentage of our population that doesn't trust the voting system. Going back to what I said a little earlier, in order to function and to be successful, we need to make sure and do what we can so that both voters, but just the general populace can trust our government. And that's in all aspects. And this question is about elections. We can do more, and at the state level, the state can do more to ensure that this process is transparent. I believe currently a lot of the voting procedures are up to each county individually. This is a situation where for state level roles, I think it's okay for the state to step in and regulate that and ensure that every election or every election in every county meets the same requirements.
Rick, same question. What would you support to reinforce and ensure voter confidence in our elections?
Our voting system is sound. It's currently sound. And it's sound because of work like the League of Women Voters and other communities and citizens over the last decades as we've adapted to technology and put in the security and the safeguards to make sure that that system is sound. And I think as legislators we need to say, the system is sound. It's working. And in Minnesota, it's working probably better than many areas around the country. We have a strong Secretary of State who works. He's out traveling. I think I saw something on social media today we have the tests of the machines that people can go to. You go in and the election judges are working their hearts out for our democracy. Doesn't matter which party they're in. Every time I go in and vote, I have confidence of those folks that are there handling that system because they're trying to do the best they can. And they do.
Aaron, rebuttal?
I don't know whether or not our elections are having issues or not, but I reiterate, people don't trust it. And whether or not it's happening or not, I think there's more that we can do to make those elections more transparent so that those that don't trust can trust.
Rick?
I think it's important to say the systems are sound even if people we support or whether we lose. That it's important in a democracy to respect the vote. We go through the process of certifying the elections. The Electoral College, that's a very public system. I'm very concerned about our democracy and the reaction to people who may not believe in the system working, but it does work because winning is not everything. When you have people running, there will be winners and losers. We need to make sure that everybody respects that.
Well, it's time for our closing statements, and we will begin with Rick.
I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having this forum. This has been great. I think it's, we've been able to go through more topics than anywhere else during the campaign, so I want to thank you for that. What sets me apart, I have the experience, knowledge, skills, and abilities of serving in the legislature, working in our community. I'm very available, trying to get the job done, and have done that. I have a record of accomplishment, but that doesn't mean that I'm done. That means that there's more work to do, and the experience of getting things done provides me with the ability to work on your behalf. We have a great district, both sides of the river, very distinct communities, but all have very important needs, and the people in those communities have those needs. I like working with you to get the job done, and I ask for your vote for another term in the Minnesota House of Representatives.
And Aaron, your closing statement.
Thank you. Again, thank you. I echo Rick's thanks. This has been a great opportunity to talk about a lot of different topics that we haven't been able to in the past. Thank you for allowing me to share my vision for both District 53 and the state. I'm committed to fighting for what I believe is right. A lot of my values align with those of a typical traditional American value. I believe we need to use our taxes more wisely. We need to strengthen our schools, and we need to commit to having safer communities. While I don't have the 20 years of legislative experience that Rick does, I have, up to this point in my life, excelled in everything I've set my mind to. I am an extremely committed father, a dedicated worker, and I ask for your vote in support. Thank you.
It has been my pleasure to moderate today's forum, and I want to thank you to SWCTC, our League of Women Voters and volunteers taking time to be here, and to our candidates, to Aaron Brooksby and Rick Hansen. So thank you so much. And remember to vote. Early voting is September 20th to November 4th, and Election Day is November 5th. Thank you, everyone. And I toss it back to Andrea.
Thanks, Jodi. This concludes our forum for the candidates running for Minnesota House District 53B. Thank you to the candidates for choosing to run for office and your participation in the forum tonight. Thank you to all of you who viewed the forum live tonight or who viewed the recording between now and the election. This is our 5th out of 6 candidate forums that the League of Women Voters Woodbury Cottage Grove area will be hosting this September. This is one of our most important services to our community. Last year we had nearly 5,000 views of our forums. The Newport City Council forum will be starting just a few minutes after this one. We also encourage you to share the replay of this forum and the others we've hosted this season with family and friends in our area. We've had the Cottage Grove City Council, Minnesota House Districts 41A and 41B, and the Woodbury City Council and Minnesota House Districts 47A and B. All of these forums are available, and this one as well, available to watch through South Washington County Telecommunications Commission. You can find them on TV and online. They will be broadcast live and then periodically replayed on Comcast Channel 18 and HD Channel 859. Otherwise, you can find them at any time through swctc.org and their YouTube channel. Videos of forums hosted by other leagues can also be found through our website, vote411.org. And like I said, we encourage folks sharing that with their friends and family who may live in other areas. Please make every effort to become informed about candidates running for all the offices on this year's ballot, and most importantly, get out and vote. And we're going to take a brief break now before our second candidate forum of this evening. Thank you.